Hello, time for our Gen Talk on a literature review. And more specifically, let's talk about the four major goals of a literature review. I'm Jennifer Kalfsbeek-Goetz, and I'm the Professor of Research Methods and Design in our Assistive Technology and Human Services class, Class 618. The four goals of a literature review are really critical. First, you need to build your knowledge in an area. Therefore, you need to do a literature review and summarize it. You also need to analyze what you've learned, synthesize it, and explain it. You're looking for gaps in a literature review as well. This is a critical element of the reason why we do a literature review in order to justify our research proposals. And finally, you justify your intended project. You go and do a literature review to make sure you're on the right track. And also, you adjust where you see that there are tweaks or interesting or new developments that can enhance what it is that you would like to study. Essentially, when we tell you, go do a literature review, we're asking you then to write a chapter that tells us, what did the literature tell you? So let's talk about this concept of literature review in the terms of a verb and also a noun. And I break it up this way because when I talk with students about, hey, you've got to review the literature or you've got to do a literature review, I can see sometimes that there's some confusion. Am I doing something or is it that thing that I have to write? And the answer is both, and they are interrelated. The verb is reviewing the literature, which you have to do first before you can create the synthesis of the literature, which is that noun side, which is also referred to as chapter 2 in any research proposal. So in the verb aspect of it, when we say, hey, you need to do your literature review, we mean go build your knowledge in the area by reviewing everything that's related directly and even indirectly to your topic. Review it all, everything that you can, so that you can be confident you have a holistic and comprehensive understanding of your topic and related topics. So that's the action of reviewing the literature until you're saturated. You've got it all, you've learned it all, you've collected it all, and now you're just repeating what you had learned with the things that you were reviewing. Then you analyze what you've learned. You synthesize it. You explain what you've learned through outlining and assessing themes and trends. Everyone has their own method for doing a literature review, but I know my past methods have included printing. I still print some things today, though far less than I used to, but I'll print abstracts for the journal articles and other readings that I have. And I will start to notice themes and create piles of those themes. The abstract tells me the article or source so that I can go grab it later, but I start creating these piled themes. And if I find that I have only one item in a particular theme, I know that maybe I need to go look for more, or maybe it's not that relevant to my topic. But at first, I'm just taking it all in, and then themes start to emerge. I even use color highlighters and make notes on those abstracts so that when I start to put it together in an outline that I create based on those themes and my goals, I can set those each in order. And the funny thing is, once I've done that, I can put them in a pile, and my literature review, when I go to the writing of it, just folds from one page to the next of my pile, all by theming it and synthesizing ideas. If I didn't do it that way, I wouldn't necessarily know which article to reference first, second, third, and so on. So chunking it into themes is critical. That's part of that analysis and synthesizing of what you've learned in that expansive review that's critical. Then you look for gaps. You look for gaps for two reasons. One, was there something you thought you'd get more information about and you haven't found it yet? You need to go look for other sources and other ways to fill that gap that you believe has already been filled and you're just not tapping in on it. You might be wrong, but you should try to fill the gaps that you see are there, things that aren't really being explained or well understood in your topic area. And a good way to fill those gaps if you're not finding them on your own is talk to your local librarian. Here at Cal State Northridge, the local librarian that we typically work with is Marcia Henry. She's phenomenal, but I find librarians are exceptional. Tell them what you've learned, tell them where you think you're missing something. They will find it with and for you. No worries. So look to fill gaps. But also in filling gaps, note that you're writing a proposal for research eventually after you've done your review of the literature, and your job is to research something that helps fill the gaps that are out there. So where you can't fill a gap, you start to have a hint about what it is that you could propose to study. And then you also do a literature review to find justification for your intended project. And you adjust based on what you've learned for your final project, all based on 1 through 3. So building your knowledge, analyzing and synthesizing what you've learned, and finding gaps is how you justify your project. And I'll tell you, sometimes students go out thinking they've got a great project idea and they realize this has already been done. There's a ton of information on this. I'm not really needing to write a proposal to do original empirical research. All I need to do is synthesize what's out there, and the answer is there. Well, then you have provided information to yourself about how you need to adjust your proposal. You've built your knowledge, you've analyzed what's out there. There were no gaps in the way that you were looking at it, but where were there gaps? Adjust your project proposal, because now you've learned the actual gap in the literature in this field, in this area, is over here. It's still related to the topic that I had, but it's a little different than what I was thinking about. So this is all the action of looking, researching, analyzing, reviewing, understanding, and planning. Get why that's the verb side of go do a literature review. When we say go do a literature review or go review the literature, we're asking you to do that research verb side of it. Then when you're done, you need to synthesize it. You need to write your literature review, which in a research proposal is their second chapter of that proposal. In a literature review chapter, that building your knowledge is still there, but in the chapter, you demonstrate your acquired knowledge base in chapter 2. So now the noun of it is the written format of all of the knowledge that you've learned in the verb of it. Your literature review will explain to your audience. It's the written form of all of that knowledge you've accumulated. Within that, you will provide your analysis, what you learned, what you synthesized, and you explain it in writing. So in that chapter 2 or literature review document, you demonstrate what you learned and all the knowledge you acquired, and that analysis and synthesis and explanation. Make sure you explain gaps that you found and how you will fill a gap or gaps. You don't have to fill every gap that you find. Sometimes students are like, oh my gosh, there's so much here, and they start to tackle it all. You may find that there are lots of gaps in the existing literature. You don't have to fill them all. You just explain where there's a gap that you thought was meaningful and important and realistic to tackle, and that you're going to tackle it, and why. That's your justification. Explain why and how you landed on your final project. That goes back to that justification element of it. So whether you're engaging in reviewing the literature, or showing us your final literature review, the verb or the noun, the focus areas are still the same 4. In sum, the 4 goals of a literature review are based on knowledge, building upon your knowledge expansively and comprehensively until you can't find anything more and you're just coming up with repeat information. Analyzing it. The analysis and synthesis of all of that is a thinking and acting and formatting and planning process. It's also what you do to make sense of the knowledge that you've built in that chapter 2. That's what someone will read as you produce that chapter, which is the noun. Gaps. You're always looking for gaps. There's no point in doing research if you haven't found gaps. Your goal is to address a gap or more than one gap, but please don't feel the need to address more than one. So acquire knowledge, analyze, intend to fill gaps, explain it, and then justify. And you justify because you did, number one, expand your knowledge. Number two, analysis. Number three, gaps. You pull it all together. Provide the rationale for your project because of all this information and how it fits together and this piece that's missing. Justification. That is how your literature review, chapter 2, should flow. So again, keep in mind, when your professor says, well, now it's time for you to do your literature review, we're not just asking you to write chapter 2. We're asking you to do chapter 2, do the literature review, and then write it up, the verb and the noun of it all. That's how you'll get at those 4 key elements of a literature review. Thank you. See you again soon.